is Strictly John Keith. Strictly John Keith on City Talk 105.9.
Hello, I'm John Keith and welcome to Strictly John Keith on City Talk 105.9. Now, sometimes in sport, one moment can define a career, one fleeting action stamped indelibly on the individual CV, often frustratingly, even annoyingly so, rather like an actor being typecast despite giving other notable performances. My studio guest is a classic example of this syndrome, thanks to his landmark goal in Everton history, struck as a 22-year-old at Goodison Park 15 years ago. It's a warm welcome to Ireland international Gareth Farrelly. Gareth, thanks for coming up the City Tower.
Thanks for having me, John.
It's lovely to have you on, and I suppose let's get it out of the way now. This goal, we can then talk about the rest of your career, but it came in the 7th minute of the final Premier League game of the season against Coventry City on Sunday, May the 10th, 1998. It was screened live on Sky TV. And at that time, Everton were in dire danger of relegation for the first time since 1951 and needed on the day a better result than fellow strugglers Bolton, who were at Chelsea. I just wondered what your and somebody brings it up, what your immediate recollection of it is.
It's funny when you're put on the spot in relation to recollection. Equally, the fact that it's 15 years now, because I think sometimes in careers you can blink and your career's over and you start to reflect on little things.
Yeah.
And I think that's as much to do with an awareness of what you've done. I think all footballers are possibly guilty of, well, sleepwalking in some ways through your career. And it's only when you get to the end that you can sort of evaluate it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think the significance of that has possibly taken on more of an emphasis on the back of how football's exposure has increased even in that space of time.
Yes.
But it's obviously something that a level of irony to, because of how difficult that year had been.
Yes.
But now, a kind of pride that it's one of the things that it is a standout point for me. So very fortunate in that respect.
Yes, because I suppose a lot of players who maybe played a lot more games than you never ever struck a goal of that significance, of that, well, it was a momentous goal. So I suppose in a sense it's a compliment to you that people do keep bringing it up, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in relation to a club and the history that Everton have. I started supporting Everton in 1983, and it was a huge thing for me. And again, growing up in Ireland, it was slightly different because the majority of Irish people were led towards being Liverpool fans. Yeah. So it was a little bit unusual in that respect. But to come through, eventually play for the team you supported, and then to have an outcome and an ending like that, it is a big deal. Slightly bittersweet now, because I'm not saying that you reflect on the glass being half empty, but I played 8 minutes football for Everton after that. Yes. And I think and that's part of football, and I think sometimes people will associate with the bright lights and the Hollywood elements to it, but there's another side to it, and in many ways for my career, the irony to that was that I came to Everton from Aston Villa. I had 5 years there. I had signed from a boy. I had brilliant relationships with people at Villa, in fact relationships that are still intact now.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And went from a team that was in the top 6, and sort of you're breaking into a team like that where there's a different type of pressure on you, a team that does very, very well. You're coming on in the last 10, 15 minutes of games where it's comfortable. Yeah. And I think there was a little bit of a false dawn then, because as soon as I became aware of the interest from Everton, I was quite blinkered that was the only thing and the only move that I wanted.
Given the fact that you were a boyhood fan.
Absolutely, yeah, yes. But equally Howard Kendall, Adrian Heath, Viv Busby were here at the time, and they were heroes. Like you talk about Kevin Sheedy, we can mention them all. Different players that growing up would have been were your proper idols. So to come to Everton and not really to give any consideration to the form and the situations, like you talk about Great Escape, but equally there'd been one a few years beforehand.
They had
Wimbledon.
Indeed, 94,
Yeah. So
I think this was the one we're talking about, was the 4th relegation battle in 5 seasons. Yeah. So it had become a norm almost for Everton.
Yeah, which is never a good norm for anybody. So I think for me, all those considerations went out the window because it was Everton that had come a-calling.
Well, we'll talk about the rest of your career in due course, but this is how the Press Association reported your priceless strike. Everton piled forward as they knew they must, and in the 7th minute, Goodison Park was rocking and swaying to the sound of Salvation. The ball was played forward, Duncan Ferguson rose to knock it down sweetly into the path of Farrelly, and the midfield man let fly from 25 yards, with surely the sweetest right-foot strike seen at Goodison Park all season. The ball fairly flew past Magnus Hedman into the top corner. It was a goal fitting to win a championship, let alone clinch survival. And as Farrelly was swamped in a sea of blue, the outpouring of emotion gave Everton the impetus to fight for every ball, to scrap for their very lives. Maybe slightly over the top.
I didn't write that either.
You didn't write. The Press Association wrote it, Gareth. But you'd have been happy to write it.
I'm telling you now, absolutely. Some slight poetic licence, but I'd have been happy with it.
Well, that's the written word from the Press Association. Here's how Kevin Keatings commentated upon that golden moment for you and Everton.
Everton have got a throw, taken quickly, helped forward towards Ferguson inside the penalty area, nodded clear. Farrelly picks it up, tries a half volley, it's there! Oh yes! What a goal from Gareth Farrelly! Well, I just wondered whether he'd get a Barry Horn style goal here today. And I tell you what, it's equally as important as that one because it has Everton in front after 6 minutes here. And it was a glorious right foot half volley. Hedman couldn't get to it, full stretch away to his left. Pandemonium inside Goodison Park.
But even after that goal, Gareth, there was more drama to come because Nick Barmby had an 84th minute penalty saved by Hedman. And 2 minutes from time, Dean Dublin headed an equaliser. And that set up a very tense finale because Bolton were losing 2-0 at Chelsea, but if Coventry scored again, Everton were down, weren't they?
Yeah, completely. And I think that the drama of the day, if you like, and the thing that sticks out for me is, again, there's different levels of pressure, and some people enjoy it and some people struggle with it, and situations like that, it's something that I really enjoyed. Yeah. And I'll always remember the day, and again, when people are recollecting it, but when we got to the ground was nearly full extremely early. The women had won. They were on the pitch with their trophy. The youth team had won the FA Youth Cup. Yeah. And that it was an atmosphere even within a warm-up of something that I had never really experienced before. But it just, the day sort of went like that. And it equally, Sky would have been not in its infancy, but not to the same level of coverage at the moment. So it was more fans' reactions that started to actually come through as to what the situation was. So it was a game, I suppose if you're being critical, we should have won easily. Yeah. Like you say, the penalty, in fairness to Nicky Barmby, an incredibly pressurised situation, but it was a very good save. Yeah. And then, as I say, for Thomas, who had been excellent that year, and like again, his first season had come in and done incredibly well, to let a soft goal in, it well and truly kept everybody on their toes right up until the end. But again, the outpouring at the end then of relief and the significance of it was massive. And again, thankfully, for Everton, I think in that time since now, we've seen what's built. It hasn't been going into the last day of a season without any pressures, probably something that people can relate to. In fact, it's been going to
the last day of a season sometimes. Can we get into Europe, which is
which is a slightly different, happier conversation to be having than worrying about where you're going to be.
As you say, anyway, you held up for a 1-1 draw. You stayed up on goal difference, both Everton and Bolton on 40 points. But it was theirs was minus 20, the goal difference, to Everton's minus 15. And just for those people who like these things, and there are many of them, Howard Kendall's side that day was Thomas Myra in goal, a back three of Craig Short, Dave Watson and Carl Tyler, a midfield of John O'Kane, Don Hutchison and yourself, Gareth, and Michael Ball. Nick Barmby in the hole behind a front two of Michael Madar and the captain Duncan Ferguson. A lot of people, I think, have forgotten about Michael Madar now, but he was up there with Duncan Ferguson, who people never forgotten about. And Danny Cadamarteri replaced Madar early in the second half, and in stoppage time, when there was all the tension still about, Gavin McCann went on for you right at the death, I think. But it had been a season from hell for Everton because Howard had used 34 players that season, which was the most since the 1880s. And the club also finished top of the so-called Unfair Play League, 80 yellow cards and 5 sendings off. So for you to be pitched into all this, which you were, as you alluded to earlier, it was quite demanding, I would have thought.
Yes, because again, my point would be, as a young player, and again you can see it now, that there's the level where people would try to be broken in gently, put them in, take them back out. And I think as my first full season coming from Villa, it was a difficult one, but one I felt the benefits for, obviously, at the end, but getting a positive outcome from it. And for me, it was testing, because you have different types of players. You have footballers, or you have people that fans will respond to on the basis if they from a tackle or from doing something different, where there's different types of bravery. And for me, it was still trying to play and get on the ball. And sometimes that didn't work, and sometimes it did. Like, we laugh at the shot, but there wasn't many shots I had during the course of that season. Some missed the target, some made goalkeepers look great. But again, we can talk about it, but it's the outcome I got from it, which is something that, like, is the reason we're still sat here today talking about it.
Well, that's right. But earlier there was another big factor in that season, because very early in the season, you were on the bench, I think, for a controversial match. Everton were Bolton's first visitors to the new Reebok Stadium. It was a goalless draw, but the referee in that game, Stephen Lodge, failed to spot that a header from Jerry Taggart, I should say, had clearly crossed the line before Terry Phelan cleared it.
Yeah, and again, you look at if buts or maybes, the significance
if that
had
been allowed, Everton would probably have been down.
Yeah, but again, I think we can relate that even now to Wigan. People will look at the immediate, whereas the fact is, over the course of a season, I have to use that as a defence, because I ended up signing for Bolton after I left Everton. And I was like, not to go into it now, but I always laughed after a few weeks, thinking, God, I'm getting booed already. I says it takes them at least 6 to 8 weeks to figure me out. And it was only afterwards somebody said to me, "Oh, well, you've scored the goal that sent Bolton down." And I sort of said to somebody, "Well, hang on, there was another 37 games over the course of that season, so not something you relate to that, but that's
Fans
part of football. People have.
Yeah.
It's something to. It was a topical point, like you say, the significance of which 1-0, if buts or maybes. I don't really see any credence in any of that.
No, well, you can't afford to in football. You've got to carry on.
No, completely, yeah.
But a couple of weeks after that game at Bolton, the game at Bolton we've just been talking about, a couple of weeks later, you scored a goal I think you remember more fondly than the one that kept Everton up, and that was at Scunthorpe in the League Cup. Yeah,
well, like, again, it was early into my time here, and we won 1-0. Right foot, to be fair, I didn't score any with my left. So it was a good start, but as I say, for me, being young, that season was an incredible learning curve.
Yes.
And Birmingham's a huge city. Aston Villa, as I say, top 6 team at the time, winning trophies. A lot of my experiences and the people I had around me would have been positive. Whereas coming to Liverpool and trying to adapt to the intensity of the city, even as an Evertonian, I had no knowledge.
Between the eyes?
Yeah, completely. So I was ill prepared for the intensity of it as a rule, let alone coming into a situation that was a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
But things like that, in some ways, like they can make or break you.
Because that was another spectacular goal, I gather. The one.
Well, no, it wasn't spectacular.
Wasn't it?
No, it was a good move, and as I say, any time you score is great. In my case, I probably missed more than I scored, but at that particular time, it was a huge positive for me. And you're looking to sort of hit the ground running.
And that was another landmark night in a difficult season, because Howard had dropped Neville Southall that night. First time he'd left him out, and he'd just become the first player to complete 200 Premier League appearances. Neville. Paul Gerrard took over in goal that night.
To be fair, Paul Gerrard had a brilliant game that night.
Did
I think he was one of the best players.
Yeah. Neville came back in later in the season, and then Thomas Myra got the job. So there were 3 goalkeepers that season for starters. So it was a very season of great change and challenge.
Hugely so, and like not all of those things are positive, as you say. Like Neville Southall, it goes without saying his standing. So when there's like a changing of the guard a little bit, it's difficult for people with new people coming in, and like you say, 34 players is not a small squad or a small transition or different things like that, but they're only things you probably reflect on when you look back on it, as opposed to when you're living it at that time. There's not really a lot of thought you give to those things.
That's right. Well, we've talked about they were the only 2 goals you scored for Everton, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, I scored it in pre-season.
Yes, you did. Yes, of course, yeah. And you made 30 senior appearances for Everton, and we'll talk more about the early part of your career and the later part. But to get right up to date, as you say, you're living on Merseyside, I think, in Southport, and you're now a man of the law. Now, tell us all about that, because you did also have to overcome a very serious cancer, didn't you?
I was very lucky in relation to cancer, and it's not something I've spoken about to a lot of people.
Well, I know it's
no,
private,
absolutely
fine,
no, not at all. I'm a massive advocate of the NHS, because basically it's probably the reason I'm sat here. 5 years ago, 2 weeks, it was my little girl's birthday, and basically I was going to see a friend in Bournemouth for some treatment. I had a bad knee at the time, and I took ill on the M40 at Warwick. Wow. And basically from the time I phoned for the ambulance to the time I left the hospital, I had incredible care. I was rushed into Warwick, where I was passing blood, vomiting, and into A&E. So difficult situation. Didn't know where I was really up to. You do the self-diagnosis analysis, where I had a brown pitta for lunch, but I didn't anticipate that the pitta had actually done that to me.
No.
I was put on a ward, and I was incredibly lucky. There was a gastroenterologist who was on call. Jeremy Sherman, unfortunately, he's a Man City fan, but you can't have everything.
You can forgive him that, I'm sure.
But he came and saw me straight away. I had an endoscopy. He said that there was a lump in my stomach, that he had a friend in Walsgrave in Coventry who he would transfer me across to, who'd be able to sort it out for me. That was I was transferred across to the hospital. I had a CT scan.
Yes.
The doctor came back to me and said, there is a lump there, we're going to have to take it out.
Yeah.
We'll be back to let you know what's happening. They came back to me incredibly quickly and said, right, we've reviewed it with a second specialist, so we're going to have to operate straight away.
Right.
So the long story short is I'd had a stomach aneurysm of the splenic artery,
I see, yeah.
and it had taken on the physical presentations of a tumour when they removed it. But I lost part of my stomach, pancreas, all of my spleen, part of my colon, because my organs, what saved me in many ways was my organs had acted like a tourniquet. The reason aneurysms are obviously so fatal is because when an organ ruptures or whatever, the difficulty people have when they go into the hospital is that they can't locate where it is or how it's happened. Yeah. But in my case, the partial rupture, my organs pushed on it, and that's what actually gave them the time to find it through the scan and then be able to fix it. So I had 3 days in intensive care, I had 3 weeks in hospital, and then I had a 9 month recovery. So it's nice to be able to talk about it in relation to offer some thanks to the people that played such a massive part in that, and that's doctors, surgeons, nurses, anaesthetists, district nurses in Southport when I came home. Every aspect of the care I had was amazing. Gareth. So
what an amazing
for
story.
me, it's everybody, lots of people have different instances, tragedies, but for me, I've had you don't wake up every day, pull the curtains and go, oh God, the grass is fabulously green today and everything smells different, but it is, in many ways, it was a life-changing experience for me.
What a wonderful, inspiring few words you've just come out with, Gareth. That's fantastic. I'm talking to Gareth Farrelly, the former Everton and Ireland midfielder. We'll be talking more to Gareth after this break. Don't go away.
This is Strictly John Keith on City Talk 105.